I want to be clear about something before I start. I'm not telling you this story because it has a clean ending. I'm telling you this story because it doesn't, and because someone has to. Ezra Maddox was my neighbor for 4 years. Quiet man, kept to himself, working nights. Had a husky named Rook that he treated like family. The kind of person you wave to in the driveway and think, he's got it figured out. Simple life, no drama, safe. His front door was open when I found it. Rook was inside, sitting by the door, completely still. She hadn't been fed. The house was cold. There were 2 sets of footprints in the snow leading away from the house. Only one came back. That was 11 days ago. The police have his file. I have his dog. And somewhere out there, in a case folder that nobody seems to be pushing very hard, is the story of how a man who survived every warning sign somehow didn't survive the night he finally understood what those warning signs meant. What follows is his account, pieced together from his journal, a phone call he made to me the night he disappeared, and everything I know about the months leading up to it. He told it better than I can, so I'll let him. His words begin here. It was a week or 2 before Christmas, 3 years ago now, though it feels longer than that when I think about it. I lived alone in a single-family home up north, where winters don't ease in gently. They arrive. That particular week, they arrived hard. Almost 3 feet of snow from a blizzard that shut the whole town down. I was glad to be off work. I stayed in all day. There was nothing else to do, and by evening the storm had gotten worse. But I was warm. I had blankets, bad TV, the sound of wind doing its thing outside. Rook was stretched across the floor near the couch. Everything was exactly the way a winter night alone is supposed to feel. I fell asleep without meaning to, slept hard for a couple of hours, when and then something pulled me out of it. Not a sound exactly, more like the memory of a sound, a faint knocking that might have been part of a dream I was already forgetting. I lay there for a second, fully awake now, listening. Nothing. The wind. The TV is low. Rook breathing near my feet. I sat up. Figured I'd head upstairs to bed while I was already up. Turned everything off, walked toward the stairs, and then stopped at the front door. I don't know why I stopped. I just had the feeling I should check. The kind of feeling that doesn't come with a reason, just a pull. I looked through the peephole first. It was blocked, packed with snow or ice, completely dark. So I opened the door. No one was there, but in the snow, 3 feet deep, blizzard thick, the kind of snow that swallows detail, there were marks. Not footprints exactly, more like drag marks. Someone had pushed their legs through the snow all the way up to my door, right up to where I was standing, and then by the looks of it, the same way back out. I stood there in the cold doorway, looking at those marks for a long moment, and I told myself it was probably nothing. That was my first mistake. Rook and I had a routine. Every night after my shift, no matter the cold, we walked the trail behind the neighborhood. It cut through the woods for about a mile, connected a few parks, and at that hour it was always empty. On just us and whatever the winter decided to do that night. This particular night, it was clear. Cold enough that my breath came out in short clouds, and the snow underfoot had that packed, squeaking crunch with every step. Rook loved it. Usually she'd be pulling ahead, nose down, restless with energy. That night she was easy on the leash and trotting alongside me like she was content just to be out. We were about half a mile in when she stopped. No warning, no slowing down. She just stopped, and her whole body changed. Ears forward and stiff, head slightly lowered, eyes locked on the path behind us. I turned and looked. Nothing. The trail stretched back between the trees, empty and dark, the kind of dark that doesn't leave gaps. No movement, no sound except the wind moving through the high branches. I said her name. She didn't look at me. I stepped past her and gave the leash a gentle pull. She came eventually, but she didn't come willingly. For the rest of the walk, she stayed pressed close to my leg, and she never looked forward. Every few steps, her eyes would drift back the way we'd come. I kept checking too, and I kept seeing nothing. And by the time we got home, I'd mostly convinced myself she'd heard an animal somewhere in the trees. Deer, maybe. Or just the wind hitting something in a way that sounded like movement. I fed her, microwaved whatever leftovers I had, and sat down. 10 minutes later, she started howling, and it came from the living room. That low, sustained sound she only makes when something has genuinely frightened her. I found her standing in front of the window, rigid, nose pointed at the glass. I hushed her and stepped up beside her to look out. The window was almost entirely frosted over. That was normal for a night like this. What wasn't normal was the one spot, roughly face height, maybe 8 inches across, where the frost was completely gone, melted cleanly away in a shape that had no other explanation. Someone had been standing on the other side of that glass, close enough that their breath had warmed it, looking in. I pulled the blinds down and stood very still for a moment. Then I went room to room and checked every other window in the house. Nothing disturbed. No other clear patches, no marks in the snow outside, no sign of anyone still out there. I went back to the couch, sat down, and turned the TV volume to almost nothing. I didn't call the police. I told myself I didn't have enough to report. Just a patch of clear glass and a dog with sharp instincts. I told myself that. Rook curled up beside me, her head on my knee, but her ears stayed forward all night, and her eyes never fully closed, and every few minutes they would drift, slow and certain, toward the front door. Rook lifted her head before I heard anything. 1 second she was settled against me. The next she was upright, ears forward, eyes on the front door. I watched her for just a moment, and then the knocking came. Loud, sudden, the kind that doesn't apologize for the hour. I didn't move. A man's voice came through the door, friendly enough words, something about needing directions, being new to the area, the cold. But the tone was off in a way I couldn't immediately name. It was too even, too prepared, like someone reading from a card they'd written earlier and practiced a few times on the drive over. I stayed quiet. That's when it got strange. Because without me making a single sound, without me giving him anything to respond to, he spoke again. He said he knew someone was home. He said he just needed a minute. He explained himself further, more detail, more reassurance, all of it unprompted, all of it delivered to a door that hadn't responded. Normal people don't do that. Normal people knock, wait, and leave. They don't narrate their own innocence into the silence. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there with Rook pressed against my leg and waited. 20 seconds passed, maybe less. Then his fist hit the door, once hard, different from the knocking, and his voice came back, quieter this time, the friendliness completely gone. He said he was sure this would come back around. That was it. Flat, monotone, like he was reading a footnote. Then footsteps across the porch, and nothing. I sat there for a long time before I did anything. 30 minutes, maybe more. I'm going back and forth on whether what I had was enough to call in. Eventually, I picked up the phone and called the non-emergency line, filed a report, gave them a description of nothing. A voice, a fist, a threat that could mean anything. The officer I spoke to was polite. There wasn't much to go on. I sat back down, TV off now. Just the low sounds of the house and Rook beside me and the dark outside the blinds. 40 minutes later, a car came down the road. Slowly. And then its headlights cut off while it was still moving, and it rolled to a stop directly in front of the house. I bent one blind slat down with my finger and watched it for a full minute. Dark, older model, no movement inside that I could see, just sitting there. Then the click from somewhere on the other side of the house. Then everything went dark. I called 911 before I'd even finished processing what had happened. Seconds later, the door started shaking. Not knocking, shaking. Fists hitting it over and over, something heavier on some of the blows. I whispered everything I could to the operator while Rook barked and pressed into my legs. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Just Rook. Just her whimpering in the dark. By the time the officers arrived, the car was gone. They found footprints leading to where it had been parked. That was all. They checked the perimeter, took notes, told me to keep my doors locked, and left. I sat in the relit house alone. If Rook pushed her whole body against my leg and stayed there. I didn't sleep. I just sat with one truth I couldn't rationalize away. Whoever this was had found me, had tested me, and had walked away knowing exactly where I lived. 3 nights later, I went back to work. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that the routine of it would settle something in me. 6 years of the same shift, the same counters, the same hum of the coolers at 2 in the morning. It had always felt reliable in a way that most things didn't. That night it just felt exposed. The station sat on the edge of town, where the streetlights stopped and the open road began. On a normal winter night, you'd get a handful of truckers, maybe a few late drivers passing through. That night, the snow had kept most people home, and the hours moved slowly. I stayed behind the counter for the first stretch, restless without knowing why, and told myself I was just tired. Around 1 in the morning, the store phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up and got almost nothing. A man's voice somewhere in the background, faint, the audio cutting in and out like wind hitting a microphone directly. I said hello twice. No response. The line wasn't dead, though. I could hear it breathing almost. I hung up and stood there for a moment looking at the phone, then talked myself out of whatever I was thinking and went to get my coat. The pumps needed clearing. I pushed the maintenance cart outside and started working through them one by one, and that's when the feeling came. The same feeling I'd brushed off on the trail with Rook. That specific, sourceless certainty that something was standing just behind me. Every time I moved to the next pump, it moved with me. I stopped and turned around twice. Empty lot, empty road. Snow coming down in that steady, indifferent way it does at that hour. Nothing there. But the feeling didn't leave until I was back inside, and then it left instantly like walking through a curtain. I stood in the warmth of the store and understood for the first time that in 6 years of night shifts, I had never once felt that way out there. Not once. That fact sat with me for the rest of the hour. At 2, the phone rang again and dropped before I reached it. I set the receiver down and turned toward the front windows, where there was a man walking through the snow toward the building. Large, broad shoulders, heavy build, moving without any hurry. I watched him cross the lot and come through the door, and I greeted him the way I greeted everyone. He didn't respond. He moved into the first aisle and started making his way through the store slowly, the way someone does when they're not looking for anything specific. I stepped back behind the counter and watched him over the shelves. My body understood it before my mind did. The way he moved, the way he kept the shelves between us, the way his eyes came up to find mine every few seconds and stayed a beat too long. He wasn't shopping. He was keeping me in place. He was something to look at so I wouldn't look at anything else. I glanced toward the window and caught a figure moving fast along the outside of the building, heading around the side. I looked back at the man in the store. He held my gaze and didn't blink. His eyes said everything they needed to say. Don't move. Don't reach for the phone. Don't make a decision you'll regret in the next 3 seconds. Then the back door thumped. Once, then twice, then a sharp metallic crack and the sound of it giving way. What happened after that was fast. The second man appeared in the back doorway, and the first one came around the counter and grabbed me before I'd finished processing that both of them were now inside. I said whatever I could. It didn't matter. When they were big and they were decided and I had nothing to negotiate with, they dragged me through the ransacked back room and out into the dark and across the lot and into the field beyond the tree line, one on each arm, moving through the deep snow like it was nothing. I had no coat, no gloves, no boots, just the clothes I'd been stocking shelves in. A quarter mile in, maybe more, they threw me face first into the ground and walked away. I lay there and waited for something worse to happen. It didn't. After a full minute, I turned and looked. They were gone. I followed their footprints back through the snow, got into the station, locked the door, and called the police. One of them was identified from the security footage, the man who had come through the front. The other had entered through the back and never once stepped into range of a camera. He was never identified. The man they caught said nothing, not about his partner and not about what they'd been looking for. And what they'd been looking for was the detail that wouldn't leave me alone, because nothing obvious was missing. The register was untouched. The safe was untouched. Whatever they'd taken from the back room, and it was something specific that they'd known was there before they arrived. I asked Harlan about it, Harlan Vesche, my manager, the man who'd owned that station for as long as I'd worked there. I asked him simply and directly what he thought they'd been after. And he looked at me like I'd said something dangerous. He asked me why I was asking, not what I meant, not what I thought, just why I was asking. Like the question itself was the problem. 3 weeks later, he called me in the morning and let me go. Severance pay, clean paperwork, completely legal. 6 years, and it ended in a phone call that lasted 4 minutes. I still don't know exactly what was in that back room, but I know that whatever it was, Harlan knew. And I know that my asking about it was the last thing I ever did at that job. Those two facts have never stopped sitting next to each other in my mind, pointing at something I was never meant to see. I've been sitting with this for weeks now, going back over everything, trying to find the place where one thing ends and the next begins. I can't find it anymore. The trail, the window, the door, the field. I used to think about them as separate nights, 3 bad stretches of luck inside the same bad season. I don't believe that anymore. Whoever came through the back of that gas station knew what they were looking for and exactly where it was. That's not a robbery, that's a retrieval, which means someone told them, which means it was planned well before that night, probably before the first phone call, possibly before Rook stopped on that trail and refused to move. I think I was being watched from further back than I ever realized. I think the window, the car, the power cut, I think those were tests or warnings. Someone measured how much I knew, how much I'd seen, how likely I was to keep asking questions. Harlan knew what was in that room. I'm certain of that now. What I can't figure out, what I keep coming back to at 2 in the morning when I can't sleep, is whether he knew what they were going to do to me when they came for it. Whether he made a calculation and I was on the wrong side of it. I've been asking the wrong question this whole time. It was never about what they were looking for. It was about whether Harlan told them I'd seen their faces. I think he did, and I think that's why this isn't over. I'm going to make one phone call tonight. If I'm wrong, I'll feel foolish in the morning and that'll be fine. But if I'm right, then someone should know what I know before I know it alone. I asked O'Dallas to keep an eye on Rook for me. She didn't ask why. She's good like that. I received his call at 12:43 in the morning. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock when the phone woke me, and I haven't forgotten a detail of that night since. He sounded calm. That's the thing that stays with me. How calm he sounded. Not flat, not frightened, just settled in a way that felt like someone who had made a decision and was at peace with it. He told me he'd been thinking through some things and that he might need a favor in the morning. He asked me to keep an eye on Rook. I said, of course. I didn't think much of it. We said goodnight. His front door was open when I walked past at 8 the next morning. Not swinging, just open. Standing open like someone had left in a hurry or hadn't left at all. I called his name from the porch. Rook appeared in the doorway, just sitting there, completely still, looking at me. She hadn't been fed. The police found 2 sets of footprints leading away from the house through the snow. One set came back to the road and stopped where a vehicle had been parked. The other set went a different direction and did not return. Ezra Maddox was reported missing that Tuesday. His case is still open. I have Rook now. She's settled in well enough, eats fine, sleeps near the bed. But every evening, without fail, she goes to the window and sits there, watching the road outside. Just watching, waiting for something or someone she seems to believe is still coming back. I hope she's right. I genuinely do. But it's been long enough now that hope is the only thing any of us have left to offer him. That's Ezra's story, or as much of it as can be told with what we know. If anything here feels familiar, if something in these details reminds you of an experience you've had or a name you've come across, I'd really encourage you to leave it in the comments below. Sometimes the pieces of a story like this only come together when the right person reads it. If this kept you up, if it made you think, if it's the kind of story you think someone else needs to hear, please share it. You never know who might have the piece that's still missing. And if you want to be here when the next one drops, subscribe and hit the bell. There are more stories like this one. Some of them are still unfolding. Stay safe, lock your doors, and trust your dog when she stops on the trail.